Do-do-do-do. Didn't
Are we
real.
live?
Are we live? Are you serious? Are we fucking live?
We
Oh
are
shit!
fucking live.
Hey, g'day fuckers. Welcome to Melbourne Music Mastering live for another Sunday night. I'm your host Tony Jack the Bear Mance. Good to have your company. We're coming from Deluxe Mastering Studios in Melbourne, Australia. Is it still the world's most livable city? Is it still
I think
considered that?
so. Yeah.
It's still up there in my book anyway. I'm really pleased to have this gentleman to your right. That's right, the other way around, isn't it? This bloke, I remember, first time I met this bloke was he was a graphic artist coming from Fitzroy, and over the years I've seen him grow from a graphic artist into a promoter, festival director, just absolutely killing it with a label, One Love, studios built, and just crushing it here in Australia. So this is the first time we're having just a really good chance to sit down and have a good conversation. Frank Cotela,
Thanks for having me.
mate, so good to have you
Yes.
here. Absolute pleasure to have you here with us, mate.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
In front of all this mastering gear.
Yeah, well, you know,
What do you got here anyway?
I got some compressors, got some equalizers, got a router and a monitor switch, and just different EQs and different compressors. All, think of us like pallets on different colors on a pallet.
Fantastic.
So,
Do people still come to you to try and get them to fix their songs?
yeah, look, it's interesting because they come with some expectation that it's going to make some worthy improvement, and it usually does. But for the most part, you're not going to, as I say, you can't make a birthday cake out of dog shit.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So you go through a process of something comes in.
We'll send it to mastering because you know what? They'll be able to fix it.
Yeah, but back in the day though, it was the mixing engineers that were thought to be the miracle makers. So the guys would track something and they said, fuck it, don't worry about the fix it in the mix, and so the mixing engineers are the guys that were meant
But
to.
don't you think that if it doesn't sound right in the studio, it's not going to sound right?
Yeah, so long as you're the only caveat to that is that your studio it translates well. So if it does sound good in your room, it should play pretty well.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for a lot of people, their studios don't. And because if I listen to the client's stuff beforehand, which I do as part of due diligence anyway, and I go, yeah, look, we need to do a little bit of this or a little bit of that. But when they have that information, then they know when they go back what adjustments they're going to make next time. So it helps them anyway. So how to work around the shortcomings.
Because the mix engineer at the end is the guy who creates that final sound, the wall of sound in the studio.
Yeah, totally.
And then I always felt that the mastering engineer was the transfer guy who created the master for whatever output it would be.
That's exactly right. Back in the day, that's what it was. I mean, but back then the industry was as such that people that got through, you had to, unlike now where everything's accessible. And people can just do whatever. You had to go through. People went through a system. You learnt the craft, and then so you had to make something of an absolute minimum in order to justify, because the cost involved back then was also very high. So you just couldn't go delete, try again. It was.
I've got to say, some of the stuff that's coming out with some of the kids that are doing out in their boxes at home is unbelievable.
It is. It's crazy, man.
Yeah,
it's crazy, and I think it's wonderful. It's like it's changed. It's evolved, and the idea that now a kid can, with a minimal investment, get himself a nice little DAW and some plugins. He's also got the benefit, or she for that matter, has got the benefit of tutorials now online to learn. There are all these short courses available. There are internet groups and forums that discuss ideas with each other, and they create this community, and it's fucking awesome, man. So, but going back to what you said, it was a different era, and the mix engineer, and I still think they're king, man. As far as I'm concerned, they're the heroes in my world, because the better the mix I get, the better job I can do for my client. So. Because ideally, as you said, it was a transfer. It's like, okay, here's a great recorded quarter-inch, half-inch tape. We're transferring it to a lacquer with a very minimal amount of processing, whereas these days we're seeing a much more processing from the mix to the final master, and with all these things.
How about this vinyl revival?
It's fucking awesome, man.
Isn't it? How good is it?
Sony's now, after 30 years, they're going to start pressing again. And
the only problem is I went to JB today and I was looking at some of the vinyl. They got everything's $50. I just can't get the unit price. I don't know. That's just a bit too exy, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think now it's just the physical cost of making the records And especially if you're going to start doing double gauge sleeve, you're going to start getting into 180 gram, 3 or 4 color. Again, you're a graphic artist, you understand
Yeah.
3, 4 color, all that sort of shit. And then if you want to get even more specific and have, gilded lettering and a poster and all that kind of shit, like the records that we grew up with back in the day, there's a cost involved. But look, I think it'll probably find its equilibrium eventually.
But the other one to look out for now is cassettes.
Oh yeah, we talked about that the other day.
Yeah.
How there are bands are now putting out cassettes. People are now starting to buy up. I'd love to get an Akamichi Dragon. I know you're a fan of the old TIAC, the old Pro TIAC.
Tascam 122 Mark IIs.
Yeah, which were fucking workhorses and beasts. They just go
Yeah.
forever. They just go forever, those things. So I've only had one request at this stage to do a master for cassette. And in fact, Adam Dempsey, who works with me, where he started back in the day at Dex, that's what he did. It was like his job was doing transfers of one cassette to another of these Amway tapes and shit like that, and all these kind of spoken word things, and as well as music. So he might become our specialist in-house cassette master.
And like the vinyl situation, one of the things I was going to bring up about the vinyl was that one of the things I found out was that a lot of people who buy vinyl don't actually have a record player.
Yeah, it's. I read that as well.
It's like the cassette guys don't have a cassette player. So it's a really funny situation, but I suppose collectors are collectors and they just love collecting. So
yeah, absolutely. But you know what? I think as there's been more and more turntable manufacturers coming online, I would not be surprised if we start seeing a rebirth, a renaissance of the cassette deck, and some Pioneer might bring one out, or Denon, or fucking.
Well, Pioneer's got 2 turntables now. Apparently, we're getting one coming up this week. They're going to send us one to have a play around with. But yeah, like it's interesting to note that they've gone into the vinyl space. Sony getting back into, I don't know how big that's going to be, but it's coming out of Japan. It'll still cost $50 a unit.
You reckon? I don't know. I reckon it might find some equilibrium once they start getting. I don't know. I'm just sort of guessing. I could be wrong, but my logic
as I was
me.
saying to you during the week, I went down to see the guys down at Zenith in Northcote, and I thought it was a fantastic setup there. What he's got. I know there's a couple of other people that are doing it and getting vinyl poured in from overseas and stuff like that. But the Zenith setup is quite interesting. I learnt a few things there that I learnt that the printing process is actually what takes the longest.
Yeah.
For
a job.
For a job, the actual printed sleeves and all that, whereas to print your actual vinyl is not actually that big a process.
Yeah, and takes as time consuming. So I guess if you want to do a small run and you're happy to do, like remember the old days, just the old white label pressings,
yeah,
or something that's a lot more humble, then you're going to be able to get a short run done pretty quickly and have them and sell them at shows and gigs and whatnot. Because let's face it, as we said the other day, and you're right, the future now is streaming. I mean, and it'll be vinyl sales, and there'll be no. And as you said, and I think you're right, the sale of the digital download as we've known it for the last 10 or 15 odd years will probably go by the wayside, or just certainly diminish.
It was even pretty sad to see, back in the 80s, a lot of those cutting lathes and pressing machines were just trashed and sent to the scrap metal.
Well, you know what, this guy called Nick, who started, Zenith as it is today was originally Corduroy back in the early 2000s.
But was that also Richmond Recorders back in the day? I can't remember.
I'm not sure. Possibly. But when I remember Nick getting it, it was a case of like he goes, he pretty much bought the whole thing for scrap metal price.
Yeah.
Pretty much the presses, scrap metal prices, and paid a reasonable amount for the lathe. But for the price of entry to invest in it, it was like, if you're around, you just would have looked at it and said, no brainer.
Yeah.
We're going in the vinyl business, and away we go. And then it kind of changed hands, and then those hip hop guys got onto it, and now Paul of Zenith is running his thing, but he's been committed from the start, man.
He's got a Neumann machine.
It's the same, It's the VMS 70.
Yeah.
It's a really good standard cutting lathe, and he's got the SL74B cutting amps and the SX74 cutting head. So he's got it's a good rig. It's a good solid rig.
So, a lot of kids don't understand about the process of cutting that vinyl, Tony. Like, you used to work in that business.
Well, yeah, that's what my style is vinyl.
Yeah, and getting the pictures right and the time and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's understanding the science on the longer the side, the quieter the side, but also in terms of cutting a big drum and bass record on a 45 was going to take a lot more space than doing something else, and everything that was point of diminishing returns. But yeah, it's not digital because it's not ones and zeros. Whereas on a CD, no matter how much bass, how much out of phase, how much level, ones and zeros are still ones and zeros, but everything's a mechanical medium. And that's why I recommend people they look at the suggestion is if they ever ask me, it's like, yeah, I would be mastering a little bit differently for it to translate better with that medium. But again, everyone can only do with what they can afford.
How funny was it when digital came into play back in the 80s? Like when Sony had the CD player. I remember getting one in at work, and we put, because in my past life I used to actually be an electronics tech engineer guy.
Yeah.
That's what I studied, or sort of studied, and worked with a great mate of mine, Evan Kelly. We were doing all this audio stuff, and it was really interesting when it came out because there was a lot of theories. You could record straight to digital. You didn't have to do mini mastering. Everything was there. The headroom was there, but then it just sort of like didn't work out like that.
No, not quite.
No,
as I expected. But I don't know. I think the analog digital,
all those DAT players and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, they were a horror. They were a fucking horror. Those things, I mean, but I think that's what really brought birth to the whole digital editing, because you couldn't, unlike analog tape, you couldn't splice it, so you had to be able to transfer that digitally, and that was my first experience with anything.
How good was splicing tape back in the day?
Did
you ever do it?
Plenty. I mean, that was the beginning.
On the 2 tracks, or even on like cutting up 24 tracks.
Yeah, that was
like a lot of people don't understand, but you used to be able to go into the actual tracks, like the 24 track or the 16 track, and then actually drop out your drum beats out of it, or pull out a drum sound out of it, and all that, which was just, it's unheard of today. But you sit there with your razor blade and you just cut.
It was nuts. And sometimes you see little different holes and stuff.
White Chinograph pencil.
Yeah, absolutely, standard equipment.
And your block in front of you,
and just these fucking long bits of tape you have to sticky tape up and remember, okay, that's one verse here, or that's a chorus there, and you have to make sure you put it in an order so it wouldn't be reversed around when you cut it in. And I was just like, when this came along, this whole digital desktop thing came along, it was just like, fuck, that really, I think, is the biggest evolution that we've seen in music recording and editing technology. Just everything going onto the desktop, and 4 million tracks now with everything that you can do here, pretty much do there with a click of a mouse or a workstation.
Look, when we had our studio back in the 80s, we had a little studio in the city, in town. We were working in the box too back then. We had a software, Voitra, and I think what was the audio software? I can't remember what it was, but we were learning all that process back then. Also, it was coming. Like tape was expensive back then, also, just as it is now, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. But the technology still was a bit expensive too. I mean, I remember, my first 1 gig hard drive, which I remember I was told, you'll never fill this fucking thing up. It was 1 gig. It was $2,000, for a 1 gig SCSI drive, which was like fucking, like 2 house bricks or something. And now we got 40 billion fucking terabytes on a thumbnail.
Well, what about this? I remember when I started doing graphic design back in, like, I think it was 1990 or 1989. We had Apple IIc, Apple II CE, and it was 40 megabytes.
Yeah.
And we had these SideQuest drives that we used to have to put our artwork on, and they stuff up, and you take them to the printers, and the whole thing would die, and then you'd have to work all throughout the night to get an annual report back together again, and it was just it was a nightmare. But 40 megabytes.
Yeah.
And we used to get around it,
Yeah. Well, that's what we knew. But I'm thinking there's going to be a day when kids will look back on 2017 Frank Cotela and say, how the fuck did they deal with just that? How those poor guys deal with this sort of Pro Tools rig and this kind of memory and this kind of space.
Well,
You know.
what's interesting is that, back in the 80s, we used to do a lot of stuff with the analog synths and keyboards and all that. And I've set myself up like a little hobby thing, which myself and Anne in the office have started playing around with modular and analog with no computers,
Mm-hmm.
like driving the whole system,
Mm-hmm.
just trying to make beats and sounds and all this sort of stuff without computers, just, using sequences and, trying to learn all the how all the different modules work and create new sounds with VCOs and all that sort of stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. I've got a really good synth collection.
I know you're quite an avid collector of those things. So how many do you reckon you got now?
I've got some really good pieces. I've got a Synthy EMS, Synthy AKS, which Les from Melbourne Uni's repairing at the moment. I've got a Buchla. I've got which is a Buchla easel, which was designed by Don Buchla. It's fantastic synth. It's like a suitcase arrangement. I've got a big ARP. I've got some 80s synths, some really classic 80s synths, like, emulators, Oscars for those. I haven't started. I'm actually just onto CV and gate at the moment, so I'm just using that technology. I'm not going into MIDI just yet.
Okay.
So that'll be the next phase. Once I'll pull out the old 80s MIDI stuff and see what we can get happening with that.
It's fun.
Yeah.
You always been that way inclined, like from a youngster. You were always into like
I love
keys
it.
and stuff like that.
Loved it. Always loved it. I thought it was fantastic.
I never got into keys as a kid, but I'll never forget the first time I heard electronic music that really made me just sort of go, and that was listening to Kraftwerk Autobahn. First time I ever heard Autobahn.
Yeah, look, the Kraftwerk thing's really interesting. Like it was good, but I've got to tell you, back in the day in the 80s, I saw him. I think I saw him at the Palais in Melbourne. They just bored the shit out of me.
A lot of people
like,
said that. They just sort of stood there and
everyone's like, oh, Kraftwerk this, Kraftwerk that. It was just fucking boring.
Yeah. But from a listening perspective as a kid, this first time I really got my head around listening to electronic sounds, that was the first time it made me just go, wow. Like,
for me, electronic sounds there was like that whole German influence,
Carl Schultz was one of those early guys.
All that stuff coming out of Belgium, Holland and all that sort of stuff. And then there was all the New York stuff, right, which was fantastic, and then you had all the East Coast rock stuff that was coming out, back in the 70s and 80s, which was, there was a little bit of electronics in there, but not a lot. But the New York, especially New York disco, like, Patrick Cowley and guys like that, Giorgio Moroder, Gino Socchio and all that sound, which was that really driving, arpeggiated bass sounds and all that sort of stuff. That was, to me, that was the electronic underground.
Yeah.
So
when did you buy your first synth?
Oh,
do you remember when you got your first synth? Or
yeah, I think I bought. I don't know. Got to ask Evan this. Like when we had the studio, I think I bought it in Sonic Mirage.
Okay.
So
is that the one that had the floppy drive?
Yeah. That was a great. It was like an 8-bit sampler keyboard. What was really good about that sampler was that was the sampler that knocked off the Fairlight.
Yeah.
Because the Fairlight was like this amazing, sampling unit which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then along came Ensoniq, which brought out this sampling unit, which was like, wow, like for, I think it was like $1,000 or something like that. You could buy a sampler and you can load up sounds and all that. We couldn't afford to buy emulators back in those days and things like that. But we had some good kit in the studio because we had a shared studio, which was myself, a friend of mine, Evan, the guys from, there was an 80s Aussie band called I'm Talking.
Yep.
We shared it with those guys too.
Catch
So
a buzz,
we
man.
all pulled out our gear,
Mhm.
and we just sort of like, it was like timeshare.
Right.
It's like timeshare studio. I had Tuesday night and Friday night or something
Yeah.
like that. And
Yeah. The other people have the other.
yeah, yeah.
But that's great.
It was a fantastic thing. I don't know why more people just don't do it now too.
Yeah, I agree. I think anything where you can get community together and people are helping each other out in
Yeah.
all on the same page and everyone sort of putting it together like that. As long as everyone plays nicely and by the rules, I think there's no reason why that sort of thing can't work.
One of the things I'm trying to really learn about again, is like compressors
Mm-hmm.
and delay units and all that sort of stuff, and how they work. I've just because it was so long since we used that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like the actual physical units.
Yep.
It's like really understanding how they work. I'd love to do a refresher course actually.
Yeah. Well, there's a I mean, if you've got some time, what I'll do is I'll send you a link to a video this guy called Simon Morrow put up last week, and he put together. It was about 20 minutes, but it's a really nice. For someone, it's for anyone that either has an idea and it just refreshes them, but even someone who has no idea could watch this video and walk away from it going, oh, kind of the way he explains the concepts of how it all works, and also blows away some of the misconceptions as well. So I'll send you a link, but Simon did a really, really nice job. So I reckon if you gave that an eyeball, you just go, oh yeah, and it'll just all come flooding back to you.
Oh, I'd love to. Send it across.
Yeah. So listen, I'm curious to know. So from studios and stuff back in the day, so you're promoting, right?
Look, promoting came in later in life because, as I said, like I've had a few careers. If you want to go way back to my history, like when I was in high school, I was like working in a Fitzroy Public Library just as after school, putting away books, doing all that sort of stuff. And where I sort of got into this whole electronic AV world was that they used to have like this back then. There was no videos, there was no, Netflix or even videos or DVDs. Like it was like if you wanted to see a movie, you went to the movies and saw a movie, right? But what we used to do at the Fitzroy Public Library was we used to have movie nights on Friday nights. So I went and did a projectionist course at RMIT. And I used to, we used to get films in. So there was kids in the afternoon, and evenings was like, mums and dads and all that would come into the Fitzroy Branch Library, and we used to show. So I used to sort of see, that's where I sort of got the interest, I suppose, and then it just grew from that. Always loved electronics and stuff like that. There was a really good friend of mine, Tez, and another really good friend of ours, Lou Mondello, which we all grew up with, went to school with. And Lou was like absolute genius at building electronics gear. Like he used to build valve amps, and he used to do mobile DJing. He used to have mobile DJ kit and go out and do it. But he built the whole system himself.
Wow, from scratch, pretty
From
much.
scratch. It was absolutely. That's how you did it back then.
Yeah.
There wasn't any money. Like no one had money to go out. So you found a couple of J bins somewhere and some horns, and you built a couple of amps. You built some ETI amps. Remember ETI, the magazine?
No.
Electronics Today.
No.
It was really popular back in the 80s. Like they used to have a lot of descriptive sort of like kit stuff, like you can build amps or you can build synthesizers. And,
okay.
Yeah.
So these are all like prefab.
DIY, like now it's like Maker and all that sort of stuff. But back then, we used to have to build everything, and I remember Lou's cousin was one of the original guys, I think, that used to have the start of JB Hi-Fi up in
Killer East.
Kilo East,
yes. And people don't believe there was a JB, but Johnny, but not Johnny, but Johnny.
Italian guy.
And he'd always sit there with a cigar, a fat cigar in his mouth. He was a wheeler and dealer, that guy, man. He was amazing. He just had the gift of gab.
So Lou was all clued up on this whole DJing thing, and so that's how we got introduced to the I don't even think there was 1200 turntables back then. I think they were something else that had like a pitch control on the top.
CDC or something.
I can't remember what they
Yeah.
were, but they were some.
Before the quartz lock turntables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, they were quartz lock, but they weren't 1200s. They were the ones prior before the 1200s. So
Okay. Someone else let us know.
yeah, I don't know.
I'll be
Yeah,
keen to
it
find
was a
out.
long time ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we, I've been hanging around electronics for a long time. Yeah, loved it. It was fantastic.
So tell us from the promoting.
Oh yeah, sorry. Getting back to promoting,
Yeah.
right? So, so I went. So I started off at the library working there. Then where did I go after that? I studied. I went. Oh, that's right. So I went and worked as a court reporter.
Really?
So how's that?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And I work for the Attorney General's Department. So, doing court cases and stuff. And again, electronics, recording court cases, all that. So I had this whole system set up and I was doing stuff. And it was a really interesting job because, they gave us they were really open. The people who were my managers at the time were really open to change because the whole court system, how it used to record court cases, was built like they used to have these old Tamberg tape recorders that reel to reels and all
I remember them. Yep.
And then so what happened was while I was working there, I went and did sort of an electronics course at RMIT. So I went and I think back then it was the technical courses. I don't know. It was at RMIT in Carlton.
Yeah.
So I did this course and I did it and I completed it. And back in those days, if you were qualified or had a diploma in something and you were employed full time by the government, you had to sort of get a job that was equivalent to your education standard.
Okay.
So we needed sort of a tech department because it was sent out to get, the equipment was getting sent out. So we started this tech department and we started, repairing the equipment as it broke down and all that. So that was an interesting thing. But what we did was we developed this, because we were about to put the courts recording system into tender so that they could replace, the aging technology and all that. But what they were going to replace it with was a proprietary system, an American system, which absolutely didn't make any sense. But because we were in the music side of things, there was a lot of stuff that I saw coming through that was really interesting. Like one of the things that was really cool was the Yamaha DMP7 mixer. Now, that was the first digital mixer that I know of that was affordable. That was, like almost like a consumer level mixer. It was I don't know if you remember it, Tony, it was like a square box about this big, flat, flying faders.
Well, I remember a few different.
Yeah.
I don't remember specifically, but I do remember when they first sort of came on the scene. And
so what we worked out was we could actually put these into every courtroom and then send the digital audio down the line via ISDN and record it at the other end, so the stenographers could grab the tapes and stuff. So it was a really cool way of doing it, and we saved the state government a lot of money by doing it this way because the proprietary system out of the US was going to cost like millions of dollars, but I think we did the whole job for like a couple of $100,000 or something. Wow. Because it was just off the shelf Tascam 122 cassette decks, Yamaha DMP7 mixers, ISDN lines, and all that sort of stuff like that. So I worked in the government for a while. But what happened was I started getting bored there, and I started really embracing computers. Like graphics was coming along. Like I really had it. I really loved doing graphics on computers and stuff. So a friend of mine, Terrence, he was working in an ad agency, so he used to come in and we used to do little bits of typesetting and all that. I used to do a little bits of typesetting for him on the computer. Just print it out. He used to make a bromide and then he used to cut it up and put it into his campaigns and stuff. And I thought, this is really great. So I went out and bought an Apple IIe or 2 CE. Yeah. And I bought a laser printer and a monitor. And I sort of got really bored in the government because Joan Kerner had just come into power and they'd cut all our funding into our department. So I was just basically sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
So one day I just left and I never went back.
Mm.
I officially have never gone back.
Yeah.
I don't think I've even resigned. So
It's worked out pretty well for you, Frank. It's been
yeah,
a good decision.
so then I got into the advertising space through that. So we're doing advertising, doing graphic design and all that sort of stuff. So um, I was basically doing freelance work for agencies, doing freelance typesetting and layouts. And then from there, I set up my own little studio, and and that was the start of the new era because that was when I met. I had a little studio in Chapel Street, and I started meeting a few club people from there,
Yeah.
and that's where I started doing club work. You know, just doing club flyers or advertising for street press and all that sort of stuff. So that grew and grew and grew, and you know, our design studio grew, and I came to Fitzroy, set it up, and came on board by that stage. So in 2000, we were in Smith Street, and Anne came on board. And one of the projects we had done, I'd always been into designing concepts for clubs and stuff. So I really loved what was going on in the UK.
Mhm.
I never looked. The UK to me is like where it was all about, and I think
Yeah.
it still is in a way. So I was looking at all this great art that was happening. You know, like Ministry of Sound, Cream. You know, all these like design. Peter Saville and all these amazing designers were doing all this club sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I started thinking about it, and I started applying it to a couple of things. So there was a couple of projects that we did. So there was a night at the Metro, which was called Parliament,
Mm.
which we applied a lot of, which I applied all this sort of stuff. And then there was Jake did a night at
This is Joe Kagakis,
yes,
former gingerbread man,
yes,
along with your partner Peter Raff.
yes,
Yes.
but this was way down the track.
Yeah.
He did a night at Salt. I can't remember what it was called, but I think it was just Salt or something. And then we applied this sort of technique to that too. We did these fancy cards, and they came in packaging and all this sort of stuff like that. And then I was working with Raf. I was in Chapel Street, and I think we were sharing a place together or something. I can't remember how this came about. Oh yeah, I was doing Chaser stuff in there too. Somehow I was doing Chaser stuff, and it was actually I was doing everyone's artwork.
Right.
Like on a Monday night, if I didn't, the routine would be like everyone was supposed to get their ad information into me on a Monday, so they usually used to give it to me by midday. I used to have to do like 4,000 ads and then get them off to the film house,
Right.
get all that, send them off to Impress, Beat, and all that sort of stuff like that. Anyway, that's where I started working with Pete. And I was doing the Chaser stuff back then too. So then when Chasers closed in, I think it was 2000,
Right.
the first, I think when George Segula sold it in 2000, I think what I ended up, George said to myself and Raf and Grant Harrison to put on a party. So we put on this party. It was the last ever night of Chasers, and it was fantastic. It was a really great night. There's no photos of it. I don't know why. And there was a lot of videos shot on the night, but it's
all gone.
It's all gone. I wish I could find it. If anyone's got it out there, just send it across. I know Timmy Burns was filming it, but I think it's disappeared into some sort of crazy
Thin air.
So that's where we started. Okay, so Chasers party was where I started my first promoting. Then a month later, I did a Better Days party with Raf at the motel, and that was pretty good. It was a house party sort of thing. And then from there, we went to the Prince, and that's when it all came
Really,
together.
yeah.
That's when One Love, because we already had a One Love we didn't have the name, but we did have the concept of what we wanted to achieve there. Like myself and Ant already had artwork ready to go and branding that we wanted to do. So we started off this night at the Prince. It was like, I think we started in May 2001, and it just started small. Like, we had a vision there.
What was that vision? Well, could you ever see something as big as Stereosonic come from this? Was that ever? Was that
Yes,
it?
and
What?
Draw will tell you this.
Right.
So when we went there, this was really funny. So um, when we went to Prince, and I had all these ideas and all this sort of stuff, and my partners were like, Raf and Draw and all that sort of stuff, and they would say to me, "Oh, if you make a couple of $100 out of this, you should be happy, and
Right.
all
Yeah.
this, the
Yeah.
usual scamming nightclub,
Yeah.
they were in it, right?
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
were already established,
Yeah.
right? So I was like, nah, this is not how it's going to work, right?
Yeah.
What I want to do is I want to build the biggest brand in Australia
Wow.
ever.
So a lot of people don't have the gumption to do that. People are too afraid to think that big. I think it's fucking awesome.
So we had a really good team that was starting to develop because we had, some promoters that were like from, uni students. We had Raf, who was like, industry and social, and all this sort of stuff. And I took care of the branding and all that sort of stuff like that. And my vision there was that we had all that sorted out. We had a great venue, which was the Prince. We had great promoters. We didn't need a lot of promoters back in those days. And we just aimed for this whole high level party. I've got to say it was a party, like it wasn't like, we weren't about bottles or bottle service and all that sort of stuff like it is in some venues now. It was just about having a great party. And we just stuck to it. And, like I said to Draw, we are going to build the biggest brand. I won't actually tell you what I actually told him, but he will tell you one day.
But what I want to know, my fascination now is the fact that even back then, you were able to go from a concept that was, you were obviously having some success in what you were doing, but to take it from that though, Frank Cotela, to the fucking juggernaut that Stereosonic was, and to think that, for me, that's not
Well,
the
that
norm.
wasn't all.
That's not the norm. So
That
what
wasn't
is
all.
it?
Okay, so
What is it that made you think that way?
What made okay, so we were buying acts from Richie and Simon from Totem, and then we had this hot club where we had all the social aspect of it. And as much as we fought like cats and dogs in the end, we needed each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like one couldn't do it without the other.
Yeah.
And I know that people won't see this or whatever, but we couldn't have done it without Totem, and Totem couldn't have done it without us. Sort of thing. Like that's what was the magic of what we did at Stereosonic. And a lot of screaming, a lot of throwing coffee cups at walls, all that sort of stuff like that. So and everyone was really,
you had to put up a lot of shit, mate.
yeah, everyone was really passionate about what they did, and there was 5 partners in a Totem One Love thing, and everyone had their crazy dynamics that they brought to it, and that's what made it fantastic.
Yeah, and it just worked.
And it worked. And
Wow.
one of the things that was really critical at the time was that it was really important because you had 2 different companies. You had Totem and you had One Love. That everything was kept in order. All books, all accounting, all taxation, all that sort of stuff was always kept in order. And we had some, between Draw and Richie, it was fantastic how they ran that business, you know, like a machine. Because when the day came and we got the offer, we got asked if we wanted to sell our company, it was really easy to do because we had all the information there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's one of the most important thing. If you're setting up a business today is, spend the money, get a good accountant on board, go to White Sky, go to these sort of accounting firms that, that are out there, and just do it probably from day one, even if you're a small time, you know,
One man show.
one man gigging DJ,
Mm.
you still need to do your accounts. You still need to do some super. You need to get all this stuff, you know, for the sake of paying, you know, a few $100 every month
Yeah.
for them to do it. Just get it done, because in the end, it'll be worth it for you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you make, because a lot of musicians and artists in general are not business people, and I know I don't like it, but like you said, I outsource it to an accountant and people that can take care of that shit. But what we got, unfortunately, we got a generation, especially from the old club days, who were fucking banging back in the day. Probably lots of money went through their hands, and now they're in situations where they're in their late 40s and 50s, who are unfortunately not very solvent. They're down. They're down their luck, and I think a lot of it,
Now,
maybe
this is
it's
a
their
really
habits. But
interesting point, Tony, because one of the things I've been thinking about lately has been post career. What happens to that DJ or artist or band that were really popular in 1991, 92, ninety
yeah,
three, who were like dark guys? You know, they were out there DJing 7 nights a week, 4 gigs a week, earning, 6, 7 grand a week, and all at once now, you know, they haven't got any gigs.
yeah,
They're not working anymore.
mm,
You know, that some of them might have even gone off on a tangent, like, and depression, mental health,
yeah. It's a big one,
drugs,
big
this,
one,
that, and the other.
big one.
So what happens there in post career?
Yeah. Well,
So a lot of these people weren't set up. They're not set up. They weren't set up as businesses, or things like that. So the, a lot of people did really well, but there's a lot of people out there that have been struggling
and
for
they're down their luck with all sorts of issues. And this is where an organisation like Support Act have been great.
for the rock and roll
for
industry.
the rock and roll industry. And I think that I think the idea of I think it's something to think about and something to even look at. What can be done. I mean, it'd be great to see if something could come along.
It'll be great to have some sort of system mechanism out there like that. Also, I don't know how it would be done, or if APRA would do it, or seeing that PPCA is so involved with collecting money from venues and all this sort of stuff. If something could be set up so that if someone who was, you know, in the at the front of it,
Mm.
falls on hard times, 10 or 15 years later, and they can't even afford, a rental, or,
Just to buy groceries and
or,
shit.
or
Yeah.
buy groceries, that
Yeah.
there's something there that can help them in the future,
As well as I think also as importantly, if not more so, the counselling, mental health support, and
Exactly.
a place where there's some level of community where, because again, if people can feel more connected with each other and come from a similar situation,
Yeah.
they can be with each other, they can support each other, they can learn to be again. I'm a great believer in it's really about how resourceful you are, and you can be up and then you can lose all your money, but people who are resourceful will still be able to, know that, okay, despite the fact I'm from nothing, I've got the nous, the street smarts, the networking, the skills to be able to build up again
Yeah.
through, networking. Because again, it's one thing I've learned recently is how powerful the idea of doing, for example, I've got a bunch of guys who are going to do a little PR for me outside of the social media world, and your radio, your traditional press, and whatever. But I thought, what, mate, he's a musician, so I thought, you know what, dude, you come to the party and really plug in on this one with me, and then I can do some mastering for it. And again, provide each other with this barter thing where you're actually giving stuff of value. But people can still do that if they're resourceful with each other.
The other thing that's really important, Tony, is that a lot of people go crazy about, being a DJ, right? Because they all want that limelight. They all want to be on that main stage at EDC in Las Vegas, blah blah blah, all
Yeah.
this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is that you're not going to get there. Like, there's going to be a handful of guys who actually make it, but not everyone's going to do it.
Yeah. What do you
And
think? What do you think is a differentiating factor? I mean, you've seen a lot of DJs over the years. I mean, you've worked at the highest echelon of this whole thing, and you've seen, you press the flesh with these guys who are the super duper duper stars, private jet flying, all that kind of stuff. What do you think has been some kind of common. I mean, people can say it's luck. It's people. I mean, people that are cynical will say it's luck. It's the whole, your mates with so and so. But there is a certain truth in that. Networking certainly is a big part of it. But what other things have you seen that has differentiated that the absolute creme de la creme from?
Okay, so we've had this situation over the last few years where people have, um, you know, in their sort of like ambition to become more popular and this and that, there's, people, people certain expectations have come about, right? Like for example, all at once you had to be a songwriter, a producer, you had
Mhm,
to be good in the studio, or else you can't get gigs, you need a song out, blah 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 blah,
mhm.
all this sort of stuff. But a good DJ or a good musician is good at what they do,
Yeah.
you know what I
Mhm,
mean?
mhm.
You don't have to have music out there to be really good.
Yeah.
People have got to understand that you don't waste your time buying a whole kit of recording gear when you don't know how to create a musical scale or play two chords together.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you forget about it. You don't. There's absolutely no need if you're good at doing it. And what people have to also understand is that maybe you've got those 6 gigs a week, right? Or 7 gigs. Maybe that's it. That's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Being realistic,
Yeah.
that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Like if something breaks out, it breaks out. But this whole, you know, idea that DJs in the last 10 years or 5 years got ghostwriters and getting people to write songs to help them careers, and
Mm.
hey, I need a song out this week because my agent needs to book a tour around the country and all this sort of stuff. That's just rubbish now.
Yeah. Do you think that's
And you
got?
know
Yeah.
what? I'll be honest, we got caught up that we at One Love with that sort of world too, because like we had, we had invested in certain people and moved them along, and then you try and find, get writers to write songs for them and all this sort of stuff. But in the end, it all catches up with everyone.
Yeah.
If you haven't got talent, you don't have
Yeah. You
talent.
get found out.
And then that's number one. Number two, if you don't have fans, you're not going to make it either.
True. People that come to shows, buy buy
Yeah.
buy the merch, buy the records, buy all that kind of stuff. What's interesting at the moment is that a couple of weeks back we were sitting down having a coffee and we were having a chat, and I was really fascinated to hear that. Obviously One Love has got its roots and tradition in EDM and electronic music and dance club culture, but now you're starting to actually book some bands.
Okay, so we sort of noticed that the industry was changing. Like we were just a small indie label. Like my background was like when we used to run clubs, and then we used to have, then we got into the festival business, and we always had this arm in Sydney, which would take care of, when we were at Sony, which would take care of the recording side of things. We actually started as a compilation business
Right.
with Sony as a joint venture.
Just
So we were
licensing tunes and putting
just
them in.
licensing tunes
Yeah.
and all that. Then we worked out there was some issues with, actually getting back in those days of getting licenses. So we started licensing direct ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and we started, putting it onto compilations and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was all great. It was all done. But then when I started looking at it, when I took over a few years ago, it was really hard to understand how to make money out of this
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And especially now with, MP3 sales have just totally collapsed. I don't think, you know, they exist. Streaming, you're making pennies. Unless you're one of the big franchises, artists that, the same 20 that you see on, the top, Ed Sheeran, Katy Perry, Calvin Harris, blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, 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 all this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that are making, the top dollar. You could be a local artist that has a platinum record
Yeah.
and you haven't even paid for your video,
Yeah.
you
It's
know.
not an uncommon scenario. Yeah, that's true, and there's irony in that because people associate anywhere where you win some kind of an award of some sort of particular note, people will associate that with being
So
successful.
we love it, but what we had to do was we had to sit down, myself and Anne, and just look at the whole business. And we had Michael Parisi come in, and he sort of helped us initially with, like restructuring the company, and then we took it like a little step further, and what we've done now with One Love is we've made it One Love Music Group, which has always been day one when we started 15 years ago was One Love Music Group. So One Love Music Group now is made up of a bunch of, I'll, I won't call them labels or management companies, but I'll call them like platforms. So what we've done now is we've got um, a hip hop platform which is called Waves WVS, which a local guy Matt Garthright's running for us. Matt, or is also known as Matt Khan around town.
You got there's some workshop being some singing workshop there.
Yeah. So that's with APRA coming up. That's Song Hubs. Yeah. So we've got this hip hop platform. Then we've got a local, band platform also, which is run by Andy Kavides. That's called Hell Beach. We've got a couple of bands on that. We've just signed a few bands for that. Also, we've got a local band, Diet, a band from Perth called Hideous Sun Demon, which played last night at the Curtin, which was fantastic. We've got a local act called Shouse. That's that world there. Then we've got the Club Love imprint, which is still our sort of like club level stuff. We've got another brand which we've started, which is Clip Art, which is a young guy from Perth running for us, Gabe, which basically is this new lo-fi sound that's out there that, and what that is about, that's a really interesting concept. That's parties and shows, but we'll do some, Spotify playlists and, build it up, and we'll do some releases around that and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So each platform, there'll be, recordings, there'll be, management option, or there'll be, we've got rights management, there's a whole lot of little components to it. But if we've got an artist that we manage, it doesn't necessarily mean that we will also put out the recordings. Right. We'll find the best deal for that artist.
Right. Just be patient with them and
yeah. Because, people who are in the One Love family, they get looked after. You know what I mean? So
I think it's important. I think one of the biggest problems we have just generally in this country with management is they don't look at people as their assets. Most of the time people look at as liabilities because it's a cost. You cost me money, you cost me overtime, you'll cost me this, rather than understanding, well, shit, this person here's got all this expertise that I have no fucking idea about. And with that, you were alluding before about the fact that we needed each other, but that's a different context. But still, being nice to people, looking after people, because again, I just look at my student, I think, well, fuck, if everyone walked out on mass tomorrow, what have I got? I've got lots of lovely equipment, a nice looking studio, but it's empty. It's doing fuck all. Songs don't mix and master themselves. Putting on events and running a label and putting out, recording records don't happen just, out of thin air. So you need people. So you got to look after them. Fucking, I guess that's one of the reasons why you do so well, mate.
So One Love Music Group's made up a series of these platforms. The other thing that's happening is that I've set up OTNA, which is going to be our touring and events company, and that's what I really want to do. I really want to get back into that, like just doing events and shows. And look, we're starting really small. Like we've done, a few events now, and we're not, wanting to do stereosonic scale stuff, but we're slowly building it. We're building, those 200 to 300 shows are going to be, becoming 500 to 600 shows, and slowly over the next, not this summer but the following summer, like hopefully they'll become 2,000 people shows, right. and just build it up slowly. So myself and Ant is also general manager of the company. But we'll be working a lot more on touring and events.
Yeah, because that's where you're seeing more opportunity and more potential for earning for artists as well.
Yeah, I think we just have to, that's just the way it is now.
Yeah. So music now, I think it's been that way for a long time. I've seen.
But it's a funny situation that you're in because you need the music, right, to create the other side, exactly. Right, to create the touring and all that. And there's absolutely no value in music almost, but what's what happens,
yeah,
the chicken or the egg.
Yeah, but I was trying to say before that's now it's still just becoming a calling card. It's a a necessity. I mean, you said DJs can be successful without actually putting out records, but I think in the context of doing a big tour, people still need some kind of draw card, something to draw them in, to give them reason. Apart
Yeah,
from
but you
being
know
good.
what, Tony? There's nothing wrong. As I said, if you're that DJ that plays at the local, 6 times a week, and you're just a DJ and you have fun doing it, that's it. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Earn your $300 a shift, or $100 a shift, or $50 a shift. Enjoy it. You've got an income, and you'll do it forever, right?
Yeah.
Once you start thinking, I need to get a song out, I need to start touring. If you're not in that world,
Yeah.
it's just going to tie you up. You don't. It's not. There's no benefit to you.
But do you think now promoters are starting to think more that way, in terms of that, the ideology of like, I'll put someone on irrespective of whether they have a record or not, but they're still good at what they do.
You know what's more important than a record? Buzz.
Yeah.
Like if you're an artist and you got buzz, but you don't have a record, that's worth a lot more than if you got a record that no one's listening to.
Right, because it's the people's perception about it's all the perception of what they think it is. Yeah. So but how many times can you keep doing that though? Do you reckon?
Oh, there's kids out there that are just working it and they love it, and they're like, promoting themselves and
man, with social media and everything, it's amazing what kids are putting out there.
Yeah.
And the talent that's out there. Like, I'd hate to think what your sifting process would be or do you have other people around you who pretty much become the coarse grind sift, and then you get down to the fine silt, it goes through that process, you get to the good stuff.
I've got a team of A&R guys there, and that's their job to find what's happening out there, and they look at everything,
Yeah.
But buzz is the key one, because anyone now can make a great song.
Pretty much.
Anyone.
But good melody is a good melody. I was talking about this yesterday, last night, about the idea that old. Do you think that older music, and let's just say 80s, for example, do you think it was more for our generation? We like it, or most of us like it because it's more of a nostalgic thing, or because back then you really needed to make a really good song, and in the 70s particularly, you're a band, there was nowhere to hide. Unlike now, you and I can make a record and create this incredible thing, sounds incredible sounds and whatnot. But speaking for myself, I'm not a musician, I'm not a songwriter. I still can't create that songwriting magic that used to exist back then, because there was less technology. They used to rely on less stuff back then than they do now.
I'm going to say it's exactly the same.
Do you think Black Sabbath? No, do you think Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin though could have created?
Yeah, but
I mean,
that's like saying, Katy Perry and
But Katy Perry though doesn't. She's got a team. She's got Max Martin and
but that's exactly right. She's in show business.
Yeah,
that's a show business person.
So, but do you think though that
So let me say something. One of these techno DJs that can't, that play it, that are really popular, and they're out there. I see them, their popularity. They're in show business. You know what I mean? I don't know their songs, but they're popular.
But through creating the buzz and whatnot. Yeah. Okay. And having a team behind them creating the buzz and whatnot. Okay. All right. It's just interesting. Just hearing old songs. I'm just curious. That's all about what is it that makes us like those things back in the day. We still like things today, but I just thought there was a difference. That's all in how things rolled out.
I think people were a bit more. No, I'm not going to say it. I think people are just as musical today as they were back in the 80s.
Yeah.
The whole DJ explosion thing just distorted things, but I think it's leveling out now. I think that, the bullshit's starting to disappear. You either got it or you haven't, in terms of popularity, ability to write music, and all that sort of, ticking all those boxes.
All right, man. So who have you been listening to right now that's really been turning your crank? Even if it's not brand new, but just what things have, of things of late have been of.
I don't know. Let's look at my Spotify, my Shazam. Let's have a look at my Shazam and see what I've been Shazamming here.
I would love to see someone try and Shazam, a song that hasn't been released, like a newly recorded thing. That'd be funny. Because people, how in the old days DJs would always try and, people would always be looking for the most upfront tune
So
of the
here
day.
we go.
Yeah. All right, go on.
Danny Bird Jam. Okay.
What's the story there?
Don't know. Just liked it. Shazammed it. Fatboy Slim's Big Beach Anthem. Summer Fried All Stars. Interesting. I Get Lifted. Barbara Tucker.
Okay, that's an old school track. Yep.
Yeah, I was listening to the Armin Gets Deep mix. I don't know why I pulled that up, but anyway. Just Keep Walking in Excess. Another Place, DJ House.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody, the Tiesto remix by Gautier. High on You, EDX. Get Closer, Me and My Toothbrush.
So
there you go.
It's pretty wide and eclectic. Yeah.
Yeah, like Katy Perry featuring Migos. There you go.
That's a
you
good
know,
one. A bit of a
Right
spread there,
On,
Frank.
Overcoats, Club Feet. Just an Illusion by Imagination. J House, Cable Ties, Confidence Man, Chance the Rapper, Snake Hips.
How much time do you spend these days just listening for pleasure, as opposed to listening for, from a label perspective, in terms of whether you want to take them on or not?
Look, I've just been, listening to a lot of the Spotify play. I love Spotify. It's fantastic. You just put on one of the browse things, and
just let it run in the background, and it kind of suggests things. Depending on what you've been playing in the past, it just kind of.
I suppose so.
Some sort
No,
of
I just go
thing.
to the charts and start at the top and work my way through.
Let it rip through.
Yeah.
Fuck, it's hard to keep on top.
I try and listen to the Triple J, ads that come out every Monday. I try and listen to each one of those every week to see what gets added to Triple J.
Are you noticing a particular trend in terms of what seems to be coming more into flavour, or do you think it's still pretty kind of really wide open in terms of what's going on?
The Aussie stuff is fantastic at the moment. There's a lot of really good, local acts and stuff happening. But the music scene's strong.
Yeah, I think that's.
It's not selling records, but it's strong.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that if I use this place as just the revolving door that it is, and hearing what's coming in and out of all different styles, we have an embarrassment of riches. Like you said, it's unfortunate they're not selling records and the exposure of who they are and getting themselves out there. But fuck, we've got a huge talent pool of different, whether it's DJs or MCs or producers or just fuckloads of them, And you probably see more than I do, because they probably hit you up wanting, hoping to get your interest or whatnot. So, where do you see it going from here now? Now it's the clubs and events is where it's going to be the main focus, but having all these platforms running alongside.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. That look, I'm just backing people with ideas. Also, like just seeing, if they want to do something and it's interesting, I'll help them. Bring that idea across.
We were talking about that idea the other day. How now you get to a point where you reach a certain level, but you also can use just your network resources, experience, whatnot, to help younger kids. Even if it's just sometimes a little something, just to send them on their way, give them something to think about, some idea, maybe point something they're not doing. So you tend to do a bit. You tend to do a bit with people, helping you along with little things apart from your roster.
Yeah, look, it's really hard with the intern thing. I just don't have the patience for it. I'll be honest. It's hard work. Like if you've got young people and you've got to, I think now we're at the stage where we've just got to get, we'll give some opportunities to some people, but they have to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you're saying in the old internship was like a year, sometimes two, depending on the way I see it now. Is I've got a couple of.
We've had some kids coming from RMIT.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and you know what? I have found that even myself, that Andre Araman, who works here, he started out from RMIT. My new guy, Tom Beard, he's also an RMIT guy. And I don't know what it is, but even other kids who have come through, who have come for job placement, like I can't give job placement, but I'll always try and help a kid with maybe a day or two here or there, just something. It's not internship, but you can still help a kid out in that period of time. Just give them half a day, just enough to pick your brain for a few things and gives them a few ideas, and away they go. And I think that's the new model of the internship, if you will, unlike the old model, which is how I came up, and
Yeah.
a lot of my contemporaries, same sort of thing. So, I think it's the other thing of now teach a kid how to fish so he can fish himself rather than try and give him a job type situation. But besides, this is not a scalable business, and most small operators like myself are not. But I think if you can help a kid get him started, get the confidence in the kids, so they can go out, do their own thing. Because I said the best way to get your foot in the door is to build the door to put your own fucking foot through. So help them do that, and away they go. And I think that's a healthier way of looking at helping to grow the scene in the community.
Yeah, well, we're trying to, but as I said, I'll leave that up to ants to take care of.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in your situation is now you oversee quite quite a lot of things, and so like you said, there's probably other people there that can come in there because I mean, the intern's starting there, so there's going to be other people above them that can take them under their wing and do whatever they can when you can. Your situation, obviously, understood. You're still enjoying it as much as you've ever have.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
You got to rejig things in your life every now and then. Like as I said, we were a recording business, a licensing business, and like that's not working for us anymore. So we've had to rejig our business. So you just do that,
You keep reinventing yourself and looking at as to look at where your strengths are, where the weaknesses are, what's working, what's not working. It's important, isn't it? Just be able to take time to reassess, because it's easy to kind of say I'm going to be on a roll with something and just keep going, even though you're doing all right. There's always technology changing. There's always trends changing. There's always stuff around you that's going on. So, I think it's good to be able to stand back and take a view of the land, go, okay, let's just see what. But more importantly, even try and look a bit further ahead. You may have to be a bit of have a crystal ball in some respects. But if you can get in on that next big thing before it's becoming the next big thing, then I think that's where the gold is. But again.
But Tony, at the end of the day, you just got to have fun doing what you do.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
Like if you don't enjoy what you're doing, then don't do it.
I couldn't agree anymore, Frank. Couldn't agree anymore.
Like it's sort of like, it's fun. Like nothing's easy.
Nope.
But easy and fun are two different things. You know?
No, absolutely. And I think that's the thing with people.
Something can be hard to do, and it's a struggle, but it's fun.
Totally. If you don't enjoy it, you won't do it. That's the difference between people while they'll get up out of bed early, while they'll make that phone call, while they'll make all these things, these little things that people overlook because they see it as hard work. It's like, well, fuck it. But they don't understand, though. It is a process, and it's always going to be a process. You're never ever going to get to the promised land. You'll get close to something. It's like, okay, well, I've achieved this. I want to look at something else. So you're always going to be doing it, and you always may as well be loving it, even though it may not seem to be successful if you want to define success as financially, viable. But I just find that shit takes care of itself. I think if you got your fundamentals down, like you said, your business down, your vision down, you more importantly have a fucking. What's your reason? Why the fuck are you doing it in the first place? That's what a lot of people don't really sit and consider. There's all this thought about what they think they can get out of it, but really, what's driving you? And it's got to be something outside yourself. It's got to be something beyond you. Otherwise, why do people who have never run in their life will go for an ultra distance marathon if someone in their family is dead from a disease, and they just go, fuck, I'm going to do this for my dad, my mum, my brother, my sister in the what I mean? They wouldn't even go to the fridge to get a can of beer, but for something outside themselves. They got a point, but we all need something bigger than ourselves, I think, to be successful. I think so anyway. That's been my experience with doing all this.
I just love it. It's just fantastic. It's like high school never ended.
Yeah. And I think it's funny. Tom Larkin was telling me that the average age of an artist is about 57. I couldn't believe that. That's lifespan. Musicians on
okay,
right? So
what happens to them after that?
Well, some go on and live. It's just an average, but it's a very low average. But I think that people that are always finding what they love and they're enjoying life will go on. I mean, you could go into fucking 100 because you love what you do every day. Something you got to purpose to get out of bed. And other people in a similar situation, I can't see myself dead at 57 unless I get hit by lightning or hit by a car or something unfortunate. But in terms of just a natural cause, while you're loving life, you're always going to be wanting to do shit.
Exactly.
And that's what makes you happy. And if you're happy in life, it's all that really matters. Everything else is just a bonus.
That's fantastic.
No. So, mate, you want to tell us a little bit about this this hip hop event or this thing you're doing in APRA? What's all that about?
Okay, so what we're doing is we've partnered up with APRA and we're putting together we're one of their song hubs. So what it is it's open up to all APRA members to I think it closes tomorrow or it's already closed, but you submit and then you'll be chosen to be part of a team of 15 that'll work with a bunch of producers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like bringing a bunch of writers together
And see, and just put them
yeah,
together,
giving them an opportunity, yeah. And they can come in from all over Australia and, you know.
And so, and I remember a friend of mine did some of that with Mushroom a little while ago.
Yeah, Ministry's done them, Mushroom's done them,
and
yeah.
they just purposely kind of put together people that weren't necessarily on paper a match, but creatively they might be able to come up with something
exactly right, yeah.
really interesting. So,
and we're doing it over at the Bakehouse. You know, they're
a good bunch down there.
Yeah, fantastic.
And crew. And also Alan Long. G'day, Alan Long, who runs the Rock and Roll Academy down there. He's doing a fantastic thing. He has these programs on school holidays for kids to come and record and do band stuff and whatnot, and then get them set to write their own song, and they have to perform that, you know, in a real pub with a PA, and you know, have a gig, an actual gig where people will come along and have that experience. I think it's fucking awesome. That's great.
Yeah, the other thing is, kids have got to get more inventive too, and people got to get more inventive. And like what I keep saying to people is, create your own parties.
Yeah.
Even if 5 of your mates turn up, that's the start. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I agree. Totally.
You know, like
your own thing in your own way. That's your thing. I couldn't agree anymore, Frank. A lot of people are scared to do it though. They're afraid of, again, they're just afraid of what if people don't come. But like you said, 5 people, there's 5 people. And then,
just go out and do it.
Yeah.
You know, you're a young band. You know, just book a space. You know, there's plenty of venues around Melbourne that'll give you a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night. You can put on, you know, do an hour set, have your friends there, and grow from that. You know.
Absolutely. Everything starts from a wee little thing. So, well, Frank, thanks very much for coming in, mate. It's been a good chat.
Yeah.
Really, really appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're going to have you another time. You know, we got this Nasty Music Mastering Life panel that's happening in Croxton Park on the 6th of August. So we're going to have a whole bunch of awesome musicians. We got it's a mainly musician-driven one. So you know, Tom Larkin and Lorenzo Stilito with some Temper Trap. He's running an agency now. Dallas Frasca will be there. And a couple of others escaped my mind. You think I should fucking know who's going to be on this fucking panel? So we've got Larkin, Lorenzo Stilito, Dallas Frasca, Mike Elrington, blues guitarist, and I say John, of course, John Course, who was in last week. We had a fucking good chat. So of course he's going to be on too.
Fantastic. At the Croc.
Yeah. So we've got a nice broad range of different people from different aspects of the industry. But the next one we do, hopefully in 3 months' time, we'll have you, because it'd be good to get some management, good to get some label
How
people.
Good's the Croc?
Croc's great, man. Croc's fucking, like, Andrew Parisi's just taking that room and, you know, he's fucking killing it down there.
So I'll tell you, when I was 18 or 17, right, we used to go there all the time. That was our local, like that, Richie's Night Spot, Bombay
Rock and Brunswick, yeah.
Hearts, Martinis
and Carlton, yes.
But Croc was really interesting. That's where I saw Little River Band, Skyhooks, AC/DC. Yeah. I saw so many acts there. It's just got the history.
Absolutely.
And it's really good that a lot of touring now has gone north side again.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like it's fantastic. Yeah. Like, you know, like a lot more promoters are using the north side venues, and it's really good.
It is, you know, Northcote Social Club, Evelyn, you know, Workers Club. There's a lot of good venues now who are putting bands of different sizes.
The Gasso, we've done a few shows there. It's good, really good.
So it's good to see that we're having this resurgence, this renaissance of venues and live music coming on. So I
think people want to go out, Tony, you know, and one of the other things I've noticed is how many major ticketed events there are at the moment. Like if you look at the Forum, how many big shows there are there, or at Margaret Court, or, you know, like all these venues around town, you know, like there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Speaking of Margaret Court, I love seeing Grinspoon, who are selling their marriage equality T-shirts outside of Market Court Arena through all that. I thought that was great. Good on them for doing that. Anyway, mate, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you in. We'll talk about getting you on that next panel, but we'll talk to you soon. And wouldn't mind talking more about that little project you're on about, because I've got some ideas. Anyway,
yeah, cool.
Thanks very much, everyone, for watching us. We'll be back next week. Next week, Mr. Andy De Silva is going to be our guest, so I'm really excited about having him on. So I'm out of here. Have a good night, fuckers. And as I say, please be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. Love you, fucks. See you later. Mwah. And that is the podcast in completion, my friend. Well, fuck that. That was good.
That was good. That was another record-breaking podcast.
Woo-hoo.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
How long do they normally go for?
No, in terms of audience.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, that's really good to know.